This is exciting, isn't it?
Here we go, guys, in 5, 4, 3.
Here we go.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Thank you for good programming, and I appreciate the content and really enjoyed every moment.
It's a privilege to have you on your station and listen. It's good stuff. It's very educational.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hello. Thanks for being here this Monday, January 27th. It is delightful to be here. There is a lot going on. You know what? I shouldn't even say that anymore. Let's just assume that's a given. Every day there is a lot going on. Okay? All right? Okay, let's just simplify our lives here. And a lot of what is going to be breaking news, particularly in these first months of the Trump administration, is going to be bad. He's going for the whole shock and awe thing. He wants to throw a bunch of stuff at people. He wants his supporters to look at him and go, oh, gosh, look, he's doing so much. But you know and I know that a lot of what he's doing by executive order. This isn't a guy who, even though he has the House and the Senate, you'd think if he really wanted to change things, he'd be passing laws now, wouldn't he? Yes, he would. He would be passing laws. This is what I want the law to say. Instead, he's doing everything by executive order. One of his executive orders has already been held up. You know, he signed an executive order. I'm ending birthright citizenship. Well, apparently no one explained to him that you don't rewrite the U.S. Constitution with an executive order. You know, he's never been a detail guy when it comes to how government works. So I don't think we can fault him for that one. He's going to do a lot of damage by executive order. Some of it's going to be stopped by the courts. Much of it is going to be dragged out with lawsuits. And hopefully, as Mark Elias of the Democracy Docket, as the American Civil Liberties Union, as all these other groups, the Sierra Club, take these various executive orders to court. Hopefully, judges will put them on hold until the court cases are decided, and we won't have to live with all of it. It has been announced today that his newest round of executive orders are going to have to do with the military. Anything that has to do with any kind of initiative that looks like DEI is he's going to write an executive order to just end that instantly. He also wants the whole situation with troops in the military who identify as trans. Yeah, he wants an investigation into that. You know, just exactly where do we stand with that right now? So he's going to, you know, target the military. He's going to target trans people. He's going after immigration. Yeah, that long-awaited ICE massive surprise raid in Chicago that surprised no one was put into effect today. In the city of Chicago, of course, police are not allowed to rat people out to ICE. Police are not allowed to help ICE arrest people. ICE has got they've got a job, they can do it, but they are supposed to do it on their own. So people are afraid. People are staying home from work. People are being instructed to not open their doors. The idea is supposed to be that people with outstanding warrants, people who are being sought as criminals, those are supposed to be the people Donald Trump said he was going to target. But when you declare that you are going to do mass raids, you are not gathering a group of people together and saying, "Oh, excuse me, Are you have a warrant out? Is there a warrant out for you? And you over there? What about you? They scoop everybody up and they figure it out later because that makes for a great photo op. Look at us putting all of these people under arrest. You know, even with Project 2025 and the fact that Donald Trump has people who are smarter and more experienced than him advising him, he's definitely going to do more damage than he did last time around. But what we are seeing so far, he's making the same mistakes. He's trying to do things that are blatantly illegal. You cannot end birthright citizenship with an executive order. That's not how things work. He's overreaching, and he's going to make a lot of enemies. Every time he's run for office, the Fraternal Order of Police has endorsed him. The Fraternal Order of Police came out and publicly chastised him for releasing the violent January 6th insurrectionists who were in jail. The FOP, who have been squarely in his corner, came out and said, this is wrong. It is wrong to do this. Long story short, Donald Trump is going to alienate a lot of people. And you know what? There's nothing we can do about it. We might as well, this is going to sound awful, we might as well enjoy it. Because the more his popularity drops, the more people see, oh, I didn't think he was going to do that. Oh, I didn't think it was going to be like that. Then the more people who are going to be motivated to vote to change the House and or the Senate at the midterm elections that are not that far away. Let me give you an example. You may have read about the fact that they had a bunch of Colombians on a plane and they were deporting them back to Colombia. And Colombia refused to let the plane land. They have to have permission to land, and they were not granted permission. And Donald Trump was furious. He then announced that there were going to be 25% tariffs on goods from Colombia. In addition to coffee, which, of course, everybody knows about Colombian coffee. In addition to coffee, which we import from Colombia, I didn't realize this, but apparently a lot of our flowers come from Colombia. And with, Valentine's Day approaching, there was a lot of fear that whether or not they stood the test of time, that these tariffs were really going to hurt the people of Colombia. So, after some negotiation, the plane was allowed to land. They didn't. The plane went back to the United States, and the president of Colombia sent his jet to pick up the migrants because what he didn't like was the way they were being treated. These migrants who are put on these planes, they're all shackled. And the argument is they're shackled so that they can't attack the Border Patrol people. But several countries, Brazil's foreign ministry is requesting an explanation from the United States government over what it said was, quote, degrading treatment that deportees were subject to on a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement repatriation flight Friday. And what happened in Colombia? Yeah, they capitulated. They said, we're not going to use your plane. We'll use our plane. And we'll go get those people, keeping their coffee exports and flour exports safe for now. But let's take a look at the bigger picture here. Donald Trump has now made an enemy out of the president of Colombia. Why is that important? Well, the Washington Post interviewed a guy by the name of Sergio Guzman, who's the director of the political consultancy Columbia Risk Analysis. Mr. Guzman said that this incident could likely push Colombia closer to China. He noted that Colombia has expressed interest in joining BRICS. That's the economic partnership of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They also are exploring being a part of China's Belt and Road Initiative. After this whole crisis arose and then apparently was settled, and I'm sure Trump is going to crow about the fact that he got them to back down. But at what cost? They are now looking at joining a coalition that includes China and Russia. China's ambassador to Colombia posted on social media yesterday that Colombia and China are in the best moment of our diplomatic relations. So congratulations, Donald Trump, because their refusing a plane of migrants embarrassed you. You have now pushed Colombia closer to being an ally to China than to us. Good job, Donald. Good job. I thought we were supposed to, that Donald was really worried about China as an adversary. We were supposed to be strong and make China weak. Wasn't that the plan? Wasn't that the plan? Instead, you got the president of Colombia to accept a plane full of deportees. And the bigger picture is that you have pushed him toward China and away from us. So yay, Donald. Yay, big picture president. And when more and more South American countries and Latin American countries start exploring other alliances, you can bet Donald Trump will give a million reasons for it, none of which have to do with how he's treating them. Hey, I don't know if you were listening over the weekend. We had some problems with our listener lines. We apparently, according to Paul Shivari, we have that fixed. So let's take a quick break and open up the phone lines, 773-763-9278. We'll be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
One other thing that I want to mention with this whole Donald Trump is going to be bad. He's going to do bad things, but the one thing saving us is his ignorance and his overreach. And the other thing that's going to be really important is public accountability, public paying attention to things that are happening and shining light on things that might otherwise be embarrassing. You know, Timothy Snyder, in his famous book on tyranny, his first number one lesson, do not obey in advance. Most of the power of authoritarianism is freely given. In times like these, individuals think ahead about what a more repressive government will want and then offer themselves without being asked. A citizen who adapts in this way is teaching power what it can do. You may have seen an announcement that the Air Force Academy was dropping a part of their curriculum that taught about some women in the Air Force and their deeds, and also the Tuskegee Airmen, blacks and women. They were going to drop that portion of the curriculum. because they were obeying in advance. I mean, somewhere in the chain of command, somebody in the Air Force said, I'm gonna come to Donald Trump's attention. I'm gonna get a big promotion, and I'm gonna be the one to tell them, hey, get rid of that Tuskegee Airmen stuff and that stuff about women. Get rid of that too. I don't think it quite worked out the way he wanted. It became public knowledge. It was reported, and it was shared widely on social media. And the backlash, oh, this is how we're going to appease Donald Trump. We're going to just drop teaching about women in the military, and we're not going to teach about the Tuskegee Airmen. Yeah, that'll make Donald Trump happy because, you know, he wants to make America white again. Not great again. He wants to make America white again. And the blowback was fast and furious. This is why power to the people is going to be so important the next few years. The Air Force announced that they are restoring that part of the curriculum. That is not going to be excised. Good God. You can't do everything, but you can do something. Even if it's just finding something that's being reported on social media and reposting it, liking it, maybe reposting it with a comment. Let's go to the phone lines. Our good friend Jim is there. Hello, Jim.
Hi, Joan. The paranoia got the best of me this weekend. I thought Trump cut off the phone lines. You know? But anyway, Joan, did you see the outfit on the border czar? It looked like something out of the wardrobe of Musk, like space outfit he had on. I mean, I couldn't believe it.
I did not.
Honestly, God, these people are such publicity hounds that his whole administration is picked by TV and the internet and everything else. But this guy is right out of Central Casting. He's got this weird outfit on, and he's saying that he's after criminals. Well, if he's after criminals, go to the White House and arrest the president, because he's the biggest criminal that I've seen in my lifetime. But you know what's interesting, Joan? Seriously, what's interesting is they had two agents went to his grammar school. Unexplained by the press. This happened on Friday. I'm waiting for any explanation. Well, there's no explanation. Anyway, they had a third grader who he just had a couple of words. He said, "I was scared to death." Now, you can imagine it's so difficult to go to school now in the United States for fear of being shot. And now you've got to worry about government agents coming into the classrooms. And I don't know if they're going to interview little kids and ask them if they've got their birth certificate. But, Joan,
did you hear about what happened over the weekend? There was a school, and they thought that ICE was trying to get into the school.
Right. That's
it. And it turned out that they were not ICE agents; they were Secret Service agents. And that, I remember when I heard that, it was like, well, that's weird. According to Block Club Chicago, the Secret Service was there because they were investigating a threat to someone they protect. That's what they put out. Block Club Chicago said they were there to try to question an 11-year-old who had posted an anti-Trump video on social media. That was the big investigation. The Secret Service showed up to a school because, by God, they wanted to get in and talk to that 11-year-old who dared post a video that was negative to Trump. So shame on them. They used to be an agency I respected, but that's just nonsense.
11-year-old kids, they're going to question 11-year-old kids. You don't think that's frightening? They have two Secret Service agents.
The school said that they didn't know who was trying to get in. There was nobody. They didn't know. There was nothing official. And the Secret Service was like, oh no, we told them we were Secret Service. We showed them our badges. And the school is saying, nah.
Right. Well, that should be blasted all over the news. In the old days, it'd be blasted all over the news. Nobody would believe it. But again, Joe, now these are supposed to be criminals they're picking up. Now, any criminal that's got any brains, they take planes into the country. They don't hang around homeless shelters and schools and so on and so forth. These arch criminals from different countries. Apparently they've stolen enough money. The Trump administration, they stole enough money to live in better conditions. You think they'd be raiding the Four Seasons or the Ritz-Carlton? They're not going to be hanging around the streets. I mean,
well, that was one thing J.B. Pritzker said. He said, if you want to deport violent criminals, we are all for that. Those are not people who are supposed to be allowed to enter this country and live in this country. But I don't know. Have you seen any ICE raids on prisons or jails? I don't know. Why are they going to schools and churches?
Right. They almost nabbed an 11-year-old kid, so for putting something on the internet. So that should shiver everybody's. That's why I was afraid. I thought maybe we're talking so bad about this lunatic that he's cut off the phones of WCPT.
Well, all I know for sure is that whatever cut off our phones came from the outside. And we had a lot of people working on it over the weekend, and apparently AT&T does our phone lines, and whatever was broken, they got fixed. But literally, it was literally 2 hours before my show started, because when I woke up this morning, I was like, okay, no phone lines. We're going to have to, figure things out, how it's going to work. Right. So.
Well, I knew you'd get to the bottom of it, Joan. But anyway, you have a great show. Good to hear from you. What a nightmare this is. What a nightmare. Thanks, Joan.
Yes. Before we go to break, I want to play that clip for you. Governor Pritzker was. He was on CNN with Dana Bash yesterday, and he said, they want to deport violent criminals. We're not gonna fight them on that. They want to, deport those people who've broken the law. Then that's fine with Pritzker. That's exactly what the law should be. Listen to JB.
When we're talking about violent criminals who've been convicted and who are undocumented, we don't want them in our state. We want them out of the country. We hope they do get deported. And if that's who they're picking up, we're all for it. They show up with a warrant, and we're going to hand over people who are in our prisons or in our jails who fit that description. Now, what they're also doing, though, and it's quite disturbing, is they're going after people who are law-abiding, who are holding down jobs, who have families here, who may have been here for a decade or 2 decades, and they're often our neighbors and our friends. And why are we going after them? These are not people who are causing problems in our country, and what we need is a path to citizenship for them. We need to secure our border. We need to get rid of the violent criminals, but we also need to protect people, at least the residents of Illinois and all across the nation, who are just doing what we hope that immigrants will do.
Yep, what we hope immigrants will do. We're going to take a break. We're going to be back with more after this.
Don't turn that dial.
A dangerous mistake to make.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now on WCPT 820.
A couple of notes. At 3 o'clock, we're going to be talking to David Hochberg. You can text me any questions you have for him. I will make sure to ask them on your behalf. Now that our phone lines are working, we will have those open. But feel free to shoot me a text right now, 773-763-9278, so I can have some questions ready to start with him. The other thing before I get back to the phone lines that I want to share with you, we've talked about who is the politician or famous person who's going to emerge as kind of the voice of the people, somebody who is willing to speak out, not in an academic, dispassionate way, but in a gut-wrenching, this is what I see, this is what I hear, this is what we do kind of a way, direct, in a way that people can understand and get behind. Well, I don't know. That person might be somebody who, up until not all that long ago, was a Republican. And I'm not talking about Adam Kinzinger. I love the things that he says, But, his voting record, just like Liz Cheney's, was not really something I could get behind. But the guy who used to be the head of the Republican Party is a guy by the name of Michael Steele. And Michael Steele refuses to drink the Kool-Aid when it comes to Trump. He always has, and he hasn't changed. And Michael Steele, this former leader of the National Republican Party, who split with his party over their worship of Donald Trump, he had some pretty passionate, pretty clear, pretty direct comments for Democrats. Listen to this.
Chill on this kumbaya bipartisan crap, because at the end of the day, here's your headline: Republicans shoot down Democratic request to ditch party line immigration push and write a bipartisan bill instead. Senate Republicans are making it clear they will pursue a border package without Democratic input. They don't want to work with you. They're not going to work with you. They have the House, the Senate, and the White House. Let them choke on that. Do not help them out because they don't want your help. They're telling you they don't want your help. So y'all need to just come to the table real and understand that the person sitting on the other side don't want you at the table. Get up, take your coffee, and go into another room.
Michael still said when they go low, y'all better go toe-to-toe.
Let me just say this. I think the American people want to see elected officials be serious and work together.
No, they don't.
That was from the cable news show The Weekend. The woman you heard is Simone Sanders Townsend. I think Michael Steele is right. Republicans don't want to work with Democrats. As a matter of fact, working, especially in the House of Representatives, working with the Democrats can get you primaried. And if you are the speaker, just ask Kevin McCarthy, it can get you thrown out of your job. So, yeah, not a lot of bipartisanship going to be happening in the very near future. By the way, one interesting little side note, I don't know if chances are, as the former Speaker of the Senate, as the former majority leader, in the Senate, Mitch McConnell knows how to count votes, so maybe he already knew his vote didn't matter. But along with Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, Mitch McConnell voted against the nomination of Pete Hegseth. It brought the Senate to a tie, sadly, because J.D. Vance is the vice president whose job is breaking ties in the Senate. J.D. Vance showed up, broke the tie, and allowed Pete Hegseth adjectives that can be said on the radio escape me. Pete Hegseth is now the head of the Department of Defense. He's head of the military. He's head of hundreds of millions of dollars in troops, and he promises he's not going to drink. He promises. How long do you think it'll take before news leaks out that he was inebriated somewhere? You know, I would like to believe some people can just decide they're not going to drink anymore and they can pull it off. But he didn't just say he was going to quit alcohol. He said he was only going to quit alcohol if he got the job. That doesn't sound like a guy who's really committed. I hope he surprises me. Our good friend Steve from the Gold Coast is on the line. Hello, Steve. How are you this Monday?
Fine, thank you. And just want to make a few points on a couple of things that have already been raised. So one, the problem in Illinois is that depending upon where you are, even a violent criminal, alien, can be released because Cook County, for instance, does not have a policy in which no matter what your crime is, we release you, say, from Cook County Jail after you pled guilty to a felony and you've done 6 months. on a reduced charge, we do not release you to ICE, despite the fact that you are now a convicted felon convicted of a violent crime. That's simply the case. Yes, I understand what the governor is saying, but that isn't the policy that's in place currently. Many people would argue that perhaps it would be a good policy.
That wasn't what I was talking about. I was talking about ICE raids. If they can raid schools and they can raid churches on these hunting expeditions, why can't they raid Cook County Jail?
Right, absolutely. I mean, as it stands now, we do not, as a matter of policy, cooperate with ICE. In other states, if you're, for instance, in a county somewhere in Montana, Oklahoma, Texas, and you're released, they will turn you over to ICE. At that point, you go from being in the custody of the Harris County Jail in Houston to being in the custody of ICE, and at which point you were deported. We don't have that policy here.
And on the surface of it, that seems like, well, why wouldn't you? You know, why? That seems like a no-brainer, except that that policy was expanded to any undocumented person who found themselves in court. And the way that policy worked out in real life is like women were afraid to report domestic violence for fear that they would go to court and be deported. So it was, I mean, if you're walking out after having served a sentence, that seems like a no-brainer. But the idea of anybody in the court system calling ICE and saying, hey, you know, somebody's got on the docket today who's undocumented. Oh, yeah, she's there because her husband beat the crap out of her and she's trying to get some protection. But whatever, we're going to just deport her.
Right, absolutely. I mean, that's the nuance of this. I mean, and the other thing is, with all due respect in terms of what happened on Friday relative to the Secret Service being at an elementary school, I mean, they claim that they did present themselves as Secret Service. Secret Service is not part of immigration enforcement. They never have been. And they, to their credit, did not push the issue. They said they were there to investigate a threat. And when they were told they would be denied access, they left. Now, CPD, for some reason, and they have not refuted this, decided to claim that these were ICE agents or that this is somehow an immigration raid. They walked that back.
I don't know. What Block Club Chicago reported was that the people at the school were confused. I don't know what the CPD said, but the people at the school were confused about who was there.
CPS, yes, CPS, not the CPD. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
but yes, I mean, so yes, and absolutely, and this is an environment in which this situation was created. I mean, we would not have this happening if it were not for this environment. So it still falls at the doorstep of people like Trump and others. But having said that, you know, I do think it's responsible to recognize what happened. So I mean, a lot of scared people in this city, and you know, when federal officials shows up, officials show up.
Steve. Last night, Ray took me out for a belated birthday dinner, and we were talking to the owner of the restaurant. And, you know, I live on the North Shore, not exactly a hotbed of ICE raids, but the owner of the restaurant said some of his employees were not showing up to work because they were afraid.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we were in the same boat. We did, a couple of places for the onset of Restaurant Week, and that's what's going on in Chicago. So I'm sure that I know that there are some restaurants up on the North Shore doing it as well. And, yeah, I mean, they were a bit slammed at both places where we went, and because they didn't have the staff. Some people are just, saying, I'm too afraid. They're just hunkered down at home, and that is the case. I take some comfort in knowing that the nomination of Pete Hegseth was challenged by at least 3 Republicans. That means, that there are at least 3 people who, at the height of Donald Trump's popularity, are still willing to say, no, we're not a rubber stamp. And that if it comes to it, I mean, that you need J.D. Vance to rescue your vote in the Senate, then that says something that, again, it's a glimmer of hope. I'm not saying that, that Mitch McConnell is our friend in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. And my question is, I know he hates Trump, and he's no longer the Senate leader, and he's probably not even going to run for re-election, so he can be pretty free with his votes. Did he do that only because he knew there weren't enough votes so that the nomination would be derailed? I wonder if he had a suspicion, say, that Joni Ernst was also going to vote against it, if he would still have done it, or if this was a gesture that he knew would be basically meaningless. I don't know. I just don't trust Mitch McConnell.
No, and you're absolutely right, because that raises a really important point. People think that this is about Republican versus Democrat, liberal versus conservative. It's also about who holds power. And this idea of the imperial presidency does not sit well with people in the Senate or a lot of people in the House, even Republicans, because this idea that we're going to govern this country from the White House, and it really doesn't matter what we think. We're just supposed to vote in terms of however Donald Trump wants us to vote. People aren't comfortable with that idea because it essentially undermines their power. And power is what Washington is about. Mm-hmm. So, there's all of these dynamics at work. It's much more complex than simply left-right. We're going to have an interesting future going forward. We're going to have to see where some of this falls. And a lot of it, as you pointed out, it's just throwing everything against the wall that you can, seeing what sticks. And then what doesn't stick, you can blame on the other side. Oh, it's those corrupt deep state judges and the Democrats. And anything that does stick, well, heck, look, I'm fulfilling my promises. Yeah. He's got an out no matter what.
Indeed, he does. Steve, thank you for the call. We got to take a quick break. I'm going to be back with more stuff to talk about and more calls right after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Talking about how there's going to be a lot of shock and awe in the first months of the Trump administration so he can impress us with all the things that he's doing. Did you hear what he said about the Palestinians in Gaza? He believes they should all be removed and resettled. Apparently, the Trump administration has already reached out to, I believe it is the country of Jordan, but he's definitely reached out to one of the Middle Eastern countries and asked them, how many Palestinians would they be willing to take? And why? Does he think that all the Palestinians should be removed from Gaza? Well, it's such a great location. It's such a wonderful piece of land. You could really develop that into a wonderful vacation resort area. And he said, I'd be interested in being a part of that. The President of the United States is reaching out to at least one country, asking them how many Palestinians they'd be willing to take so that he can empty Gaza of Palestinians, and then he can get it there and build some hotels. The weather is amazing. They have really amazing weather in the ocean. It's all oceanfront. Are you kidding me? What an embarrassment. What an embarrassment this man is. It's breathtaking. Let's go back to the phone lines. Gregory's on the line from Hyde Park. Hey, Gregory, thanks so much for the call today.
Well, good afternoon, Ms. Esposito. I was impressed that you are continuing our post-mortem analysis of how we lost this historic election to Trump, of all things. Besides the Republican dirty tricks of knocking people off the rolls and not approving provisional ballots, but you were citing a couple of times polling research that has revealed that many young people stay home because they don't like the way Biden misprosecuted the war in Gaza, not being able to rein in Netanyahu and all the rest of it. And I also would love to see any polling research on how much the way the war, or just the fact that the war keeps going on and on in Ukraine. And even if you have a different narrative and understanding or perspective on that, as we too have, because I see it more as Russia defending its buffer zone against American nuclear missiles if NATO expands, and you see it as a former, autocratic, communist empire trying to just grab and steal from the Ukrainians, people they don't even see as an authentic ethnic identity. But regardless of that, Americans I think that millions of Americans are definitely afraid of that war potentially escalating, and it's only like a 1 or 5% chance that it could go nuclear in some way, or then we
actually there was a time when I agreed with you about the fear of escalation. I don't think that's a concern anymore. I think that the way Europe has come together, I don't feel, and frankly, for a while, Putin was talking about his nukes, and he hasn't done anything like that, any saber rattling like that for a while. Here's my fear. Here's my fear, Greg, is that Putin has said, Trump wants us to talk about a settlement. I would be open to those kinds of discussions, but part of the reason why President Zelensky has been reluctant to go along with that is the fear, and this is coming out of the American military. The fear is that Putin would simply use the talks as a respite to try to, again, build up his troops, build up his material. He basically would use it as a little rest period to try to build up his military ability. And then once the talks just somehow don't work out, he would be stronger than ever. That's the fear in a lot of American military circles.
I hear you, but after attending the European Nuclear Disarmament Conference in March of 1983 in West Berlin, which triggered the détente between Gorbachev and Reagan and the end of the Cold War and the reunification of Germany, it was understood that NATO would not expand 1 inch east of East Germany, and there was the whole issue of the Pershing II intermediate-range missiles being deployed by Reagan and NATO. And so from that perspective, it is understandable in the minds of a lot of people why the Russians don't like that NATO's come right up to their jugular vein and they need a security zone. The point is that
Gregory. Paul, end this call. End this call, Paul. Gregory, you say the same thing every time, and it doesn't become more true because you repeat yourself. Every time, you've even started lying to the board op, saying, I want to talk about X, and then you get on, it's like, Russia was right to invade Ukraine. They were so worried. They were so worried, my butt. They thought Ukraine was weak, and that Putin has never acknowledged that there is such a thing as Ukraine. As far as he's concerned, the Soviet Socialist Republic needs to be reunited. That was a fake country, and we're just going to reabsorb them back in. It is our right. It is our birthright. I'm sorry. Let's go back to the phone lines and see if we have better luck with Al from Franklin Park. Hello, Al.
Hi, Joan. I hope you had a good birthday weekend.
I did. I had a lovely one.
Oh, that's good. You interviewed Betty last week from Indivisible Chicago and told us about the meetup at Columbia College. And I went down there on Saturday, and I think someone told me there were 600 people there. They overflowed the auditorium, and very good reputation, all people trying to figure out how to move forward and beat Trumpism next time. So I just was going to give you a positive input.
That's
on
a
that.
great turnout.
Yes. I'm not sure about that 600, but we
was a lot,
over
is what you're saying.
auditorium, and there were a lot of people out in the hall, too, that they were and we got to talk to Ezra over Zoom, and he's the founder, and I talked to the Jason, which is the founder of the Chicago, and had some good conversations with him as well. So it was just a good, positive looking forward experience for me.
Hey, Al, what advice did they give the audience for how we are? I mean, did they talk about resisting? Did they talk about activism? And if so, like what if anything, did they suggest to the crowd of how to survive?
Boy, that's a good one. And it was all good information and all going forward. We had representatives from the LGBTQ community, from the immigrant community, and a lot of advice on community building, of course, and coming up with the goals of what we can do. in the future. And I guess I listen to a lot of it, but I'm pretty focused on media, and so I was talking to them a lot about the media and how they can suggestions for them to improve it and so on. So I'm not remembering everything, but I had conversations with people next to me, and everybody was there and really horrified at where we're at and trying to figure out what to do to fix things. And then I have one more point, if you got a minute or not.
Oh, sure. Quick. We got it.
Okay. That is that terrestrial TV right now has this channel 35.2, which has been having Dr. Phil on it, that's been nonstop talking about the raids in Chicago and why they were done, and pro-Trump, and having a lot of interviews with different people in the administration and so on. So they're out there with their propaganda, on terrestrial TV, and you hear more of it too on. This is the same virtual channel as Turner Broadcasting Network is, and Daystar's on there, and they're all in there, all pro-Trump and so on. And that's just something that we have to be aware of, because they're spreading their garbage media all over the place.
Yeah. And it's not going to stop anytime soon. Al, thank you so much for that call. I appreciate it. And, we got time. Let's go back to the phone lines. Ron is on the line from Chicago. Hello, Ron.
Hello. Yeah, the other country was Saudi Arabia.
Was it?
Yeah. They said no. And a couple more executive orders today. Trans people will no longer be welcome in the military. They will be banned.
Well, I heard that on CNN was reporting that they're going to investigate. They're going to investigate to, see whether or not they're good soldiers.
Yeah. And also anybody in the military who was removed because they wouldn't take the COVID-19 vaccine.
Oh, yeah. And see, here's the thing. It had nothing to do. I don't care if you want to take the COVID vaccine or not. Those military were discharged, not because they said, I won't take the vaccine, because they disobeyed a direct order. When you join the military and you go through boot camp, one of the things you do is you go over to the medical dispensary and you stand there and you get a bunch of shots in each arm, because they want to make sure everybody in the military has all their vaccinations up to date. So to say you didn't want COVID was just political. And whether or not you felt like it was, they didn't say no to any of the other shots. And they disobeyed. They were ordered to do this, and they disobeyed a direct order. Is that the kind of military you want, where they pick and choose? Oh, you want me to do guard duty tonight? I'm really tired and I'm a little hungover. Maybe you should get somebody else to do guard duty tonight.
Right. So they're going to be reinstated and given back pay.
Yeah. Yep. It's a brave new world.
Yeah, and in my neighborhood, Albany, there's a report in my neighborhood, Albany Park, that yesterday a man was walking with his wife, and ICE agents came up to them and took his wife away. So.
If talk to Block Club Chicago about that, because they have a reporter embedded in that area, and they can dig in, because if that indeed actually happened, I would love to get more information on that.
I'll try that.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right.
Thanks, Ron. Oh, it is a brave new world we are living in, kids. It absolutely is a brave new world. By the way, I also want to mention that today is Holocaust Remembrance Day. Yeah. Never forget. There are a lot of programs going on in various synagogues and various museums. I don't think, Paul, we have time I think the soundbite is too long. Andy Miles did an interview with Estelle Glazer Laughlin. This interview was done in 2019 when she was 90 years old. He did a podcast series for the Illinois Holocaust Museum. Estelle was born in Poland in 1929. And when she was 10, her family was forced into the Warsaw Ghetto. They hid in a secret room to avoid the deportations of 1942. Her father built a bunker in which the family hid. The bunker was eventually exposed by a bomb, and the family was sent to an extermination camp. Estelle was 13, and she survived that experience. Do something today to educate yourself about that terrible time. We are going to take a break. I'm going to go through the text line and find your questions for David Hochberg, and we'll get started on that right after the news.
Don't turn that dial.
A dangerous mistake to make.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now on WCPT 820.
Did you hear that report just now in the news of the Associated Press where they were talking about a shop in Hong Kong where they serve snake soup? Why is it that everything that's unusual, weird, is compared to chicken? Oh, well, it tastes kind of like chicken. Yeah, I once had crocodile meat. And they were like, oh, yeah, it tastes kind of like chicken. I've had frog legs. Tastes kind of like chicken. And now I'm supposed to believe snake tastes kind of like chicken? Probably the worst chicken you've ever eaten in your life. But that is neither here nor there, because we have questions, and our beloved David Hochberg is here with answers. How are you, my dear?
I'm great. Have you ever had frog legs?
I have. They don't taste like chicken.
Okay.
You think they taste like chicken?
Well, Phil Schmidt, remember Phil Schmidt?
Yeah, that's where I had them. Yeah.
Yeah, by the steel mills.
Yeah.
Yeah, those were that place. Rest in peace. That was a great restaurant back in the day.
They were famous for their frog legs. You had to try them.
Yeah. And the perch, it was unbelievable. And they brought the sides out with the kidney beans and the pickles and all the helpings. It was old school. That's old school, baby.
Yeah, seriously, old school. Well, I've got a number. We finally fixed our phone lines, so I do have some questions for you. And I want to start with this particular question that was texted in because it also dovetails with a question that I've had. I mean, I know that it is much easier to get a loan when you have a job as opposed to even if you're retired and you have decent retirement income, but it's more of a passive income. People just selling things seem to really like that whole job thing. So here's a question I got via the text line. Can a couple in their mid-70s with a credit rating of 810, God love them, with a 50% down payment get a mortgage? Obviously, they're not working. So could they?
Well, there's kind of like you left the other half of the equation off. So here, can they get a mortgage? Like how much income do they have coming in? How much assets do they have? What type of assets do they have? And there's a lot of factors that go into being able to answer that question. 70-some-year-old, how old are they? How young are they?
There's a couple in their mid-70s with a credit rating of 810. They can put down a 50% down payment, wondering if they can get a mortgage for the rest of it.
Okay, so you could most likely get a reverse mortgage because they're over 62. So
I think they want to buy something new. I don't think this is their. I don't think they're refinancing what they've got.
No, you could get a reverse mortgage to buy a house as well. So the answer to their question, 100%. We do it all the time. So that couple can purchase a home with a reverse mortgage. But that couple who has great credit and has 50% down of what? Right? Is it a $200,000, $500,000, $1 million? How much is the purchase price? How much are the taxes? How much are the assessments? Is it in a floodplain? If it's in a floodplain, what's the flood insurance? Is it a condo? What's the condo association do? So there's a lot of different variables that we need more information in order to give them a yes/no answer.
But the rule of thumb
on a Ford.
Isn't the rule of thumb, though, that while maybe it's not impossible, it's a lot easier to get a mortgage if you are gainfully employed? I know one thing, when I retired the first time, when I was still in my 40s, believe it or not, one thing that I didn't realize was that luckily it didn't matter because I had like 4 credit cards, but you can't get a credit card. It's like you can have, millions with Goldman Sachs and be living off the interest, but they're like, well, yeah, but who's your employer? What do you mean you don't have an employer? I can't remember why I applied for a credit card. It must have been one of those deals for points or discounts or something. Yeah. And I was refused, and I was gobsmacked.
Yeah, that was pre-David Hochberg before you knew me. So if you knew me now and that same thing happened, I'd tell you to give me, generate $1,000 off your vast assets, and we'll open up 2 500 secured credit cards, Team Hochberg secured credit cards with KCTCU, and within 6 to 12 months, those will be unsecured, and you'll have 2 credit cards rolling. So, again, there are so many different variables. I'm not trying to be a smart aleck here. It's tough to answer that question. I'll give you the lawyerly answer because you have a bunch of attorneys listening, and they love this phrase, it depends. And, I need more information. Any lender that couple goes to, God bless them that they're in their 70s. God bless them that they've got 50% of whatever they're trying to buy. We don't know what the purchase price is, so we don't know how much of an asset down they're putting down, right? And how there are too many different variables, part of that equation, to give you a full answer other than they would qualify for a reverse mortgage.
Huh. Interesting. Okie dokie. And here we go with the next one. These came in on the text line, and I get confused by our text line. Okay. David, why are we seeing all these commercials for companies that will buy your house as is? What does that say about the market?
It shows you that there's a lot of homeowners in distress. It shows you that you haven't heard about it yet, but foreclosures are going up. You haven't heard about it yet, but those companies are not blasting the airwaves and investing the money that they're investing. And I know how expensive those commercials cost. Those commercials are not inexpensive, and they're bombing the market because there's a need. And there's a need in the marketplace for homeowners or those that inherit their piece of property to get out of it and get out of it quick. If there wasn't a demand or a need, the Grandviews and Jeff Buys Homes and all those other companies out there doing it, they wouldn't be laying out the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars a month blasting the airways on both radio and TV if there wasn't a need. So it used to be Grandview, right? Grandview used to be the only one. Then this guy, Jeff Buys Homes, started coming out. And I'm not knocking them. It's just, those are the 2 big companies that are in that marketplace. And the reason they're doing it is because there's a demand for their services. And or else they wouldn't be investing that much money on the radio and on TV to advertise. I will tell you this, though. I work with a group of realtors that and again, I'm not knocking Jeff Buys Homes and Grandview, but their business model is when you call them, they're going to buy your house 60 to 70% of the market value. Because that's the business model, right? You want to get in, you want to get out. You're not going to get the house is worth $300,000. They're not going to give you $300,000 for that house. Okay, they're going to give you $180,000 for the house. Okay, because that's their business model. They got to get in, they got to cover your closing costs, they got to close quick. So, in a lot of instances, right? Listen, if you've got a hoarder situation, the place is a disaster, and you want to turn it over quick, take the check and get the hell out. But in a lot of situations, on my show, we get calls about that. I've connected them with Sarah Leonard of the Legacy Properties Group, and they're able to get pretty much sell it at market value and turn it around so quick because lack of inventory, right, Joan? I mean, there's still we've been talking about lack of inventory for 4 years. It's still the case. So, again, not knocking those companies. Those companies have a business model, but your listeners might be better off calling a realtor like Sarah Leonard, who I work with, and I'll be more than happy to introduce your team to her. She's got a great group. She sells more real estate than anybody here in Illinois, and you might just maximize the value more than going to those write a check and dump your house companies. Again, I'm not knocking them. That's their business model, and it's just another
Well,
look, right?
You live out of state. Your parents die. You inherit their house.
100%.
You know the house is like 60 years old and needs a ton of work, and you just don't want to deal with it. I mean, I can see in a situation
totally
like that. Yeah.
I totally get it. But in those type of situations, a local realtor has got access to companies that will come in, sweep the house, donate everything that can be donated to charitable causes, scrap the rest out, and then you just take the cost of cleaning out the house off the sale price of the house at the higher price. So there's different creative ways to structure a transaction. But again, if instead of calling those two companies that are prevalent in the marketplace, at least give me a call and introduce you to my team and get a second or third opinion.
Okie dokie. All right, here we go again. Mortgage. Some of my texters are a little terse. They basically give us bullet points. Mortgage with 50% down payment.
Yep.
SFH to rent for $500 to $1,000 more than meeting. Oh, I don't understand this one. I don't. I'm sorry.
So it's a single family house. No, it's a single family home. SFH is a single family home. It looks like, from what you're telling me, from what I'm deciphering, is that they're getting $500 to $1,000 more than what they're getting
mortgage
in
interest rates.
Mortgage
yes,
payment.
now I'm figuring out the acronym slowly.
Cash flow. Yeah, so they're getting cash flow. So they've got a good rate. They've got 50% equity, single family home. From what I'm just deciphering, and they've got $500 to $1,000 positive cash flow above their mortgage payment, rent, and taxes and insurance. Keep going.
Actually, I don't know what the question is. I don't I'm sorry, David. There's too many abbreviations and. I don't.
Have him call me.
Okay, call David Hochberg.
I was all excited. We broke down the code. It was like
I know.
Okay.
Well, it says mortgage with 50% down payment. SFH to rent for $500 to $1,000 more than MTG, INT, INS, etc.
Yeah, they're
not employed. Credit score 800 plus. What's the question? I don't understand.
Right. All right. Well, they're in a great position because they're at 50% loan to value. They're getting positive cash flow, $500 to $1,000. The challenge is they're not employed. You just said, so that's a challenge. So, what's their age? Do they have assets? Do they have retirement funds? Can they get a co-signer? All those variables. Again, they're great questions. We're just missing part of the rest of the equation.
Okay, for those of you who are going to be texting in questions. Remember, they have to go through me, and I don't have the same grasp of the jargon that David does. So, write them a little bit more simply, if you don't mind. We're going to take a break, but I do want to include this last, it's not the last text, the last one I'm going to read. Just tell Hochberg I love him. No questions today, but I'm listening intently.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad. It's not an 847 text, because if it is, that's my wife, and I just want to make sure. I just want to tell my wife who's listening, I have nothing going on the side. I swear to God.
That's from Paula. That's from Paula, not your wife. We are going to take a break. We're going to be back with more of your texted in questions, assuming I can understand them, for David Hochberg right after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I am reading your text questions for David Hochberg. Okay, this one, David, is kind of long, and I think it's actually sort of two things. So I'm going to break it down into the two things that I think it is. God help us. Okay. He's considering, this is John from Indiana, he's considering opening 2 new credit cards with 0% interest introduction periods to pay down a $7,500 credit card debt that he has on one card. That's the first thing. Does that make sense to you? Is that he wants to try to pay the balance down faster and save money?
100%. No, I totally get it, which means John must have good credit because he's not going to get 0% finance offered to him unless he has good credit. So I'm assuming that. So yeah, next part.
Okay. He's also wants to get a HELOC, which is a home equity loan. See, I know some of these acronyms.
Yeah.
He wants to get a home equity loan in case of an emergency. But he wants to know, should he get the HELOC first or should he get the cards and pay down the other card first? Does it matter?
No, it's a great question. So, John, from Indiana, is that what the guy's name is?
Yes, John from Indiana.
All right, So what I'd recommend to John, because typically those 0% finance cards are great. The challenge is you've got a short period of time that it's 0% financing, and the credit cards that are offering the 0% financing typically want that money back faster. So your typical, I know I keep saying typical, and I apologize, but the standard fee is usually the standard payback is usually 2 to 4% of the outstanding balance. On those 0% interest rate cards, the standard fee is multiplied more than that, right? The minimum payment is greater than your typical 2 to 4% because the credit card company wants their money back 0% financing before the teaser time is up. The challenge is if you don't pay it back in full, some of those companies slam you for the interest for the time you open it up. That's why you have to read the fine print. If John or Jim, whatever our friend Indiana,
John from Indiana,
John from Indiana could pay off the 7 Gs prior to whatever the introductory period of the 0%, that's great. I would still take out a line of credit. Maybe you could use the line of credit.
Well, but if he gets the extra credit cards, will that hurt him? Will it be like, oh my God, you've got 4 credit cards, or?
Not really. No, not at all. If he's got that good of credit to get those 0% finance offers, you're not getting those offers if you're below 600 or 660. You typically have to be in the 700s or have very strong credit profile and credit history to get those. So I'm assuming John has. I'm just making an assumption in the 700s, which will make him easily qualify for a HELOC if he has the income and the equity in his home to pull that off. So I would probably do them both, and I'd probably have my friend in Indiana weigh the risk and reward of just putting it all on a HELOC first to knock it out, because you're paying 0% financing, but the minimum monthly payment is going to be substantially higher on the introductory period of the credit cards. But everybody gets tantalized by the 0% finance, or do it both, right? So take out both, take out a HELOC, and when the 0% financing is about to run out and you still have anything left on those credit cards, just swipe a check from the HELOC, which is a home equity line of credit, which is a checkbook against your house, to pay off the remaining balance, so he doesn't get penalized. So the best of both worlds.
I also, at your urging, got a HELOC, just in case for a rainy day. And when I got it, the bank officer said, oh, by the way, if you open up a checking account with us and put a bunch of money in it and then don't actually touch that money for about a year and a half, we'll give you a better rate. And I was like, oh, better rate. But I'm not using the HELOC. I'm not using it to buy a new furnace or my house hasn't burned down. Did I do a stupid thing?
No.
Was that stupid?
No. First of all, I would never call you stupid. Never call anybody stupid. Second of all, it's not a bad move. It's a very smart move for a number of different reasons. Number one, the best time to take out a line of credit is when you don't need it, so it's there when you need it, and you never thought you needed it, and your world is crumbling around you, and you lost your job, you got sick, somebody passed away, whatever happened, right? Life happens. So you did the great move, right? You did it when you didn't need it, so it's there when you never thought you needed it.
But did I do a stupid thing by tying up money in a savings account that I'm not allowed to touch for a HELOC that I have no intention of using?
No, because I would have to assume it's not that great of a deal of money for your assets, right? So the assets that you put over there without getting too deep in the weeds, probably didn't impact your life at all for the short period of time you had to put it in there to get a lower rate. It definitely makes sense. And then the 12 months or 18 months when that gestation period ends, whatever that period of time that you had to, gestation period is probably the wrong word, but that time period that you have to have that money locked down, right? It's not going to negatively impact you. For other listeners, if you had to put up an extra $500 or $1,000 to get that lower rate for something they would never use, that would spin them out of control because they don't have an extra $500 or $1,000 laying around. So that's why it's different for everybody. Thank God that you are in a position that you had whatever money they needed to get you a lower rate, and it didn't negatively impact you. So you definitely did the right thing. You didn't do something stupid. That was a very smart thing because you never know, right? You might want to buy another house, and you can't sell your current house, right? And you're thinking, my house is
I always figured if I got into trouble, I would sell one of Ray's kidneys and maybe part of his liver. I mean, that's worth a pretty penny, don't you think?
Sure, at least $7.50, right? You can't even get a Euro sandwich combo with that. So, and I've seen Ray's liver, and it's not you can't get the cheese fries. You can just get the small bag of fries. So, that's great. And if God forbid, and I mean this in all sincerity, and I hope Ray lives to be 150, but if something happens to Ray and his liver and his lungs aren't there and his kidneys aren't there to sell, now what are you going to do, right? And then that's the challenge. Right, and again, I know you're joking, but to be serious, everybody's like, I'm going to live to be 150. Well, guess what? We have a short time on this planet, and when we expire, we're gone. And what the best time to plan for something of the unexpected is while you're still on this side of the grass. You still have good credit. You still have income. You're still earning. So I got into an argument with it wasn't an argument. A 90-some-year-old guy called into my show Saturday. He's like, I own my house free and clear. What do you think of these LifeLock things? And I see, the LifeLock insurance where people can't steal your house. I said, listen, you can get insurance for anything. Right? He's 92 years old. God bless him. Right? He lives in a $400,000 home free and clear. I said, I wouldn't buy it myself, but personally, you could solve that problem by taking out a home equity line of credit for $320,000 against your house if you qualified for it on your income. And then he starts getting into it with me on the radio. I'm like, listen, I'm not here to argue with you. I'm telling you, pull out an 80% HELOC against your $400,000 home. It shows as a loan. You're less susceptible to those scams because a scam artist is not going to try to steal your title, which I still don't know how that's done without breaking a number of different laws. If there's a $320,000 HELOC, which is a loan against your house. So then we got into like an hour conversation, people calling in about HELOCs. Again, you did the right thing. You have equity in your home. That HELOC protects you against a number of different things, and one of them being having people try to steal your home away from you because you have an extra mortgage on your home, even though you're never using it.
Interesting.
Okay. I learned that from a real estate attorney. Yeah.
Okay. We only have about 20 seconds before the next break. So that's going to give me time to get through these texts, which are stacking up like planes over O'Hare. David Hochberg is answering your questions. He and I are going to take a brief respite, and we will be back with more right after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I am here with David Hochberg. He is answering your questions. And somebody just texted in, I had a foreclosure in June of 2024. Is there any way to get a loan with a 5% down or so? I assume he's talking about a mortgage loan.
Yeah, so I'm assuming so too. So June of 2024, here's the challenge with foreclosures. It's not when you were foreclosed upon, it's when your name's taken off the deed of the house, right? So back in the Wild West days when everything was going crazy in 06 through 08, when everything went, 07, 08, 9, and 10, there was such a backlog at the county level to get all these foreclosures recorded. Somebody would get foreclosed. I'm sorry for the long answer, but it's important for your texter. Would get foreclosed in June of 2004, and the sheriff's sale wouldn't happen until June of 2026. So the rule is you can get an FHA loan 3 years after a foreclosure. Fannie and Freddie, it's 7. Okay, so Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac conventional loan, it's 7. But FHA, you can get it 3 years after your name is removed from the deed of the property. So if you were foreclosed in June of last year, it doesn't mean that that property was sold and that mortgage was paid off. So that's a big thing. And then the other thing is if you, I'm sorry for giving the long answer here, but it's important for your listeners to understand. If the loan was on the home while it went into foreclosure, when it went into foreclosure, was an FHA loan, you now have to wait for the FHA 3 years after FHA paid the insurance claim on that foreclosure. So the answer is yes, you can get a loan. The answer is you have to wait 3 years until after your name is taken off the deed. The other answer is there are some portfolio lenders if you've reestablished your credit and have a larger down payment, will extend a loan if you qualify after 2 years. But usually you need more than 3.5% down, which is the FHA requirement. You need at least probably a good 20%, 10 to 20% down, and you have to have reestablished your credit, which I can help you do after a foreclosure if you'd like.
Okay. Here's a question. Why is President Trump talking about going to the Fed and telling them to lower interest rates again? Wouldn't that be inflationary?
President Trump is flooding the zone with so much crap. I would say a different word, but we'd get fined by the FCC, and I want to be invited back. Is flooding the zone with so much crap right now, you just can't keep up, right? It's like a gerbil on a treadmill. He is encouraging the Fed to lower short-term rates, and the Fed isn't going to do what President Trump wants them to do, right? They're an independent body. Will it be inflationary? Well, dropping the rates from a full point between October through October 7th, I think is when the Fed first rate cut did it. Fed Chair Powell, through the end of the year, they dropped it 100 basis points, and inflation took off. Does that mean that inflation is going to continue to take off? I don't know. There's a lot of variables that go into it, but typically when you cut rates and inflation goes up, you don't keep cutting it, right? That's not too much common sense. So the bigger move that President Trump did was Sandra Thompson, the old director of the FHFA, which I was not a big fan of, she resigned her post prior to Trump being inaugurated, and I believe his name is Bill Pulte, who was the president or founder of Pulte Homes, was nominated to be the new director of FHFA, and it'll be refreshing to have somebody who's actually built homes and has been in the housing industry run the agency and be the director of an agency instead of a bureaucrat who's been in government for 25 years running the agency, who's done nothing but make it more expensive for borrowers to get loans, which made no sense. So she was a disaster. And, hopefully Mr. Pulte will eliminate and remove a lot of the taxes that she put in place to make it more expensive for homeowners to get homes and to get loans.
Taxes? I'm confused. You mean taxes on your mortgage, taxes on your income? I'm confused, David.
Okay, so,
and I also don't really understand what the head of that agency does anyway. So let's get basic.
It sets policies for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Okay, that's what it does. It sets policies.
Here's these are going to be the new rules. Here's who we lend to.
Correct.
Here's how we do it. That person has the power to just do that on their own?
That power Sandra Thompson had the power to change the loan level price adjusters on loans. So basically what she did was she took the price of loans and made it more expensive for credit score borrowers with 680 on up. She made it more expensive. It was a tax. It was a hidden tax. It's cost homeowners hundreds of millions of dollars to reduce the fees on low credit score borrowers under the guise of equality and under the guise of affordable housing, which was a bunch of crap, because I could show you just as many white people with crappy credit as I could show you black and brown people with crappy credit. Okay, you're taught to pay your bills on time, and you're rewarded with higher credit scores, and you're rewarded with higher propensity to repay your loans back, and you're rewarded with lower interest rates. She changed that formula and made it more expensive for borrowers with great credit to secure loans, and made it cheaper for borrowers with lower credit scores to secure loans. Okay, and she said it wasn't a tax. It was a tax. That's 100% lie. She said it was because of affordable housing programs. There are hundreds of affordable housing programs out there throughout the country. Okay, each state has their own affordable housing program. So she was a disaster. I'm glad she's gone. She had 20-plus years of government service. She lost touch with what's really happening in the real world. She cost homeowners hundreds of millions of dollars in added mortgage payments. And hopefully Mr. Pulte will come in. He's got his own challenges, but hopefully he'll bring in some common sense from a guy who's actually built homes and a guy who's actually spoken to homeowners who are buying homes, and bring some common sense back to that agency.
Speaking of affordable housing, I saved this, I don't know, a week or two ago from the Wall Street Journal. It's an article. It says, think 15% vacancy rates are only a problem for owners of office towers. America has a serious housing shortage, but not for the type of apartments that real estate investors have been building in record numbers. And the title of the article is An Overabundance of Fancy Apartments. I don't know if you saw this article. Is that would you agree?
Well, I will agree that I could only speak to what's happening locally here, and I speak to what's happening locally here.
They were looking. One place they were looking at was Austin, Texas. Yeah. But they said part of the problem is a herd mentality that saw real estate developers pile into the same cities to build the same kinds of properties.
Yeah, and what happened during COVID, right? You saw a housing explosion in Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, and Texas, namely Austin, Texas, right? You saw just a huge boom up and down, in Tennessee as well. You saw a huge boom. So what happens? Oversupply now, interest rates are high, and now you're having a correction. Will that inventory get absorbed? Absolutely. Will it take a couple of years to get absorbed? Maybe.
What do you mean absorbed? You mean they'll find tenants?
Yeah. Somebody, or they'll lower their rents in order to keep them occupied, or they'll lower their price in order to sell them. I can tell you, speaking to realtors and speaking to owners of luxury condos here in downtown Chicago, that market's getting absolutely devastated because of the lack of buyers who want to move into downtown Chicago. I mean, I've got a lady who has a $2.2 million condo. She moved from the North Shore downtown because her kids are downtown, and her kid lives on the Gold Coast. And then during COVID, there was a bullet shot through her baby's window in the condo in the Gold Coast. So they couldn't wait to get out of there fast enough. Mom and Dad moved downtown to be closer to the kids and the grandkids. Took them over a year to get a replacement window during COVID for the condo because of the supply shortage challenges, right, in the supply chain. And this lady is probably going to take a $500,000 hit on her condo because they want to get out of the city so bad due to the lack of leadership in the city and the county level. It's like a clown show down there. So, you've got challenges in the condo market downtown Chicago. You've got bigger challenge in the luxury condo market in downtown Chicago because those homeowners are either moving out of the state or moving back up north, right? And I'm not just getting this from homeowners that try to sell their homes. I'm getting it from realtors as well. So say what you want, but those transfer taxes on those condos when they're not selling negatively impacts the purses of the treasurer's office on what Maria collects, right? And if property values go down, you're getting less taxes on your transfer stamps. And if people aren't staying downtown and are keeping those condos vacant because they don't feel safe, they're not going to restaurants, they're not going to shops. So it all spills down. It's a trickle-down theory.
David Hochberg is answering your questions and answering my questions. We are going to take a break and be back with more of that right after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
David, with all of the talk, David Hochberg is here, and he's answering your questions. First, let's do a real easy one. Is the Federal Reserve privately owned?
No, the Federal Reserve is not a business. It's the government agency that regulates the monetary policy of the United States of America, right? There's, I believe, 9 or 10, I think it's 10 different regions, and each region has a president. We have Goolsbee. He used to work in the Obama administration. Austin Goolsbee. He's down at the University of Chicago. Brilliant guy. I remember him when he was with the Obama administration. He would come out, talk about jobs when we were going in a death spiral, and he was very knowledgeable and very communicative and very good at explaining what's happening. And he's now the Chicago Fed president here. So it's tough getting him on the phone, obviously, because he's the head of the Chicago Federal Reserve, but very smart guy. If you could get him on the phone, Joan, for an interview, the guy's fascinating, and he's brilliant, and we're very lucky to have him be the president. And I've never met him. I've just seen him on TV, and whenever he's on TV or I see an interview online of an excerpt of his interview, I always stop what I'm doing and watch it because I always learn something. The guy's brilliant, and we're lucky to have him.
As I started to say, with all the news about these immigration raids and everything, somebody texted in, is there any way to know how many mortgages are out there being held by people who could possibly be deported? Can you get a mortgage if you're not a citizen? If you have,
no.
You can't.
Temporary status. I just talked to somebody on a green card today. I mean, obviously a green card, there's different visas and there's different, it's a great question, right? But it's not like where when you get a mortgage, you have to show some type of residency, right? You have to show a green card, right, or a work visa. There's A1 and there's B1 and there's a bunch of different it's like alphabet soup. I don't do a ton of those loans, so I'm not really up to speed on that. But when somebody comes to me, I send it into our help desk. I'm like, hey, I got a B1 and here's what it's all about. And then they send me back to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac guidelines for that. So I got this about 20 years ago. How many illegal aliens, illegal immigrants have mortgages? And I made a snap back. Listen, jackass, there's no box on the loan application to say if you're an illegal immigrant. So plus, it's not like you're getting mortgages. You need to have a job. You need to have a Social Security number. You're going through 2 or 3 background checks and name cross-references in order to get a loan now. It's very difficult. Like back in 05, between 01 and 07, it was the Wild West because nobody was checking anything. After everything collapsed, Dodd-Frank came out with a bunch of new rules, thank God, where you're doing a bunch of different background checks. You do a name, cross-referencing names. You're going against you're checking against databases. You're checking, we're pulling tax returns from the IRS, tax transcripts. So if you're doing a fraudulent loan today, I don't know how you're doing it because of all the different steps that we have to go through to make sure Tom Smith is actually Tom Smith and Samantha Jones is actually Samantha Jones. I don't know how you're getting a fraudulent loan done today with all the checks and cross checks that we have to go to. So I don't know how you get a number, Joan, of how many illegal immigrants have mortgages, but I would state that number is not really large. And if it is large and it does go into foreclosure and it doesn't get turned over, then there's another piece of property available and goes back on the market and somebody else buys it. Not trying to be a cold-hearted SOB. It's just capitalism.
Somebody else is following up on that question about the Fed and who owns it. They're saying, the Fed is not an agency of the government. It's a group of private banks. So therefore, wouldn't it be privately owned if the banks are privately owned?
No, it's a much grander. I wasn't ready for this question, or else I would have delved deeper. Okay, it's not a federal agency. I stand corrected. I'm not versed. I'm not prepared to answer that question right now. So instead of me fumbling and doing a little jig here, I better defer it until I get more information as to exactly what, Google it offline here, then come back and tell you what it is. So
yeah, I don't know why we seem to have gotten stuck on this point. Yeah. I heard something, and I think this was reported by the Associated Press last week. Sometimes they do these little one-sentence stories. And I wrote it down as soon as I heard it. They were reporting a record number of people are now making the minimum payment on their credit cards. You also just said at the beginning of our talk that foreclosures were on the way up. Are we headed for some kind of crisis? And if so, how do we head it off?
Yeah, we're already in it. The number of the car loan delinquencies past 60 and 90 days have eclipsed 2008 levels. So that's not good. So you've got auto loans going into foreclosure at levels higher than 2008. We already talked about this a couple of weeks back. 2 out of 5 Americans are maxed out on their credit cards. You've got foreclosures rising. How do I know that? Because the number of gentlemen that work for companies that look into houses for lenders and servicers who have homes in foreclosures, right? They kind of do like a health and wellness check on the house. Follow me and call me every once in a while and say, hey, our numbers are up. And they called me, both of them, just in the past 30 days, saying, hey, we saw an uptick at the end of last year, and it's really starting to get bad. So these are the guys that are driving around towns, looking in the windows and doing the once around the houses to make sure the copper downspouts are still on and nobody's broken in to rip out any of the appliances, and the house is in still good working order, right? They got the keys and they go in there and check it out, flush the toilets, make sure everything's working. So, they do the quick drive-bys. They've been more busy than they have been in months. And you couple this with all of the different variables out there, right, where you've got credit card delinquencies increasing, auto loan delinquencies increasing. You've got the balloon blown up so big right now, you can't get much more air in that balloon before it pops. And how do you head it off? I don't know how you head it off. Right, there has to be a correction. Just look at the stock market today, with everybody chasing after GPT and everything else, and the Chinese come out with one that does what it does but cheaper. Right, and what happens? Everything's overvalued. Right here,
Ray had a question. When we were talking this morning, he wanted to ask me if you followed the bond market, because does the bond market affect mortgage rates?
Yeah, the 10-year bond is what governs the bond market, governs the 30-year fix. The 10-year bond is what governs the 30-year fixed loan. And for the first 22 years I was in the industry, up until January of 2023, you could add 200 basis points, which is 2 points above the 10-year, and you would have where the 30-year fix is. So when everybody says, I talk to listeners, and they're like, I got a 2.5% 30-year fixed loan. I'm like, you got it in August of 2020. And they're like, how'd you know? I'm like, because the 10-year bond in August of 2020 was at its record low at 0.5. And you had 200 basis point, 2 points on top of the 0.5, you get 2.5%. Challenge is, in January of 2023, you had Wells Fargo leave the mortgage market and stop buying bonds, and that added an extra 100 basis points to it. So we went from a 200, I know I'm getting down the weeds, but to answer Ray's question, it used to be, you could look at the 10-year note, which today opened at 4.53, right? So it's up four full points from August of 2020, right? We're up 4 full points, okay? But the interest rates are 300 basis points or 3 full points above what the 10-year note is. So today you've got interest rates between 7 and 7.5. That's where they are. And if you get quoted 6.5, you better be. I hope that lender's buying you flowers and chocolates and buying you cab fare, giving you cab fare, because they're charging you a ton of discount points to get you into the 6s. So just be careful, right? You're going to pay for everything. I mean, I can put everybody in the 6s and charge them an extra 10, 15 grand in discount points, but I don't play that scumbag move. Others do. I don't.
You know, I like to read a lot about real estate and selling a home and, decorating a home. And I find that none of the articles agree. Like, on if you're thinking of selling your home, these are the things that will return value. These are the repairs. These are the updates. And then you read another article that says, oh, no, don't do those things. Do this one instead. And people are talking about, a new garage door, or, that makes a bigger impact than, a lot of other things that you could do. So I know that when you sold your house, you did some work on that house. Did you just do what the realtor told you to, and you trusted that the realtor knew about your area, and like this is worth spending your money on and this isn't? Because it's all over the map. Fix up your bathroom, don't fix up your bathroom. Refinish the floors, no, don't refinish the floors. There's no agreement.
Well, here, the best advice I could give anybody who's thinking about selling their house, especially in this market where there is a lack of inventory, and you put something on the market that's reasonably priced in a reasonable area, with good schools and transportation where people want to live, your home will be sold in a week. Okay, it's just a fact. There's just lack of inventory, even with rates in the high 6s, low 7s. That being said, I would not spend a penny on anything in my home before talking with a realtor, to get a realtor who dances on that dance floor every single day and is in that market every single day, and it knows what's coming on the market and knows what recently closed within that market, that you have a house or looking, we're talking about selling a house, that you have a house that you want to sell. You need to contact a real estate professional in your area, have him or her come out, evaluate your home, and ask them the question: should I paint? Should I put a new door on? Should I put new shades? The first thing they'll tell you is to declutter, right? I mean, that's the first thing every realtor is going to tell you is to declutter. And then, you know what you do? You shut up, you listen, and you learn. And whatever the realtor tells you, if you trust that realtor, spending 10, 15 grand to redo something, you might not have to do. And if you redo it, the people buying your house might just turn around and not like what you did. So, don't do anything. Talk to a real estate professional in your area, get their advice, and follow that advice.
Well, I think decluttering is always a good idea. Only I keep telling Ray, get rid of all your stuff, and then there will be less clutter. And so far, he has been resistant to that idea. Maybe you should speak with him.
Well, thank God you didn't say if you got rid of Ray, you would definitely get decluttered.
No, I need that kidney and that liver. What are you talking about? I can't get rid of Ray.
Right for the beef combo sandwich. I understand.
But, also one thing, you haven't mentioned this, but, as I've been going through my boxes of crap, a lot of it is, I saved every bit of artwork that my children did. And I've run across things like a class picture that I had framed when you were in 6th grade. And I've been saying to my kids, you got your own places now. You can take some of this stuff. And the response is, we don't want that. So now I've got a framed photograph of my son from 6th grade. I don't want it. I don't even know who those kids are anymore. It's very difficult. And somehow I don't think Goodwill wants it either.
I think you should talk to somebody professionally about it. It seems like this is a challenge that you can't let go.
Well, my therapist retired, David, so...
now there you go. Maybe you should find a new one.
My daughter thinks you're right. I don't know. Anyway, I was at the very end, I was going to ask you if there was anything you felt that you needed to share, since we've pretty much gone through all of the texts. but we have only about a minute and a half left. So anything you want to share in a minute and a half?
Well, doing the Vestathon again. I help raise money and awareness for the Chicago Police Memorial Foundation to raise funds, and we're looking for corporate sponsors. So if anybody's interested and want more information, call me, 855-563-2843.
And what's that for again? Say it again.
Chicago Police Memorial Foundation purchases replacement bulletproof vests for the officers of the Chicago Police Department because the Chicago Police Department, for some reason, the city of Chicago does not buy replacement bulletproof vests for the officers. So I team up with Alderman Matt O'Shea, and I do a radiothon for that. Then he has pancake breakfast. The radiothon's on the 22nd. Another radio station, and Matt does the pancake breakfast at one of the 600 churches in his ward on the southwest side. And we've raised over, I think, almost $700,000 over the past 4 years. So we're looking for corporate sponsors there. Give me a call. And last but not least, I'm speaking at the Freedom Center of the Salvation Army. There was a radiothon on another station. I always donate $5,000 at the end of the year for that. And this year I said I don't want it to just go into a pot. I want it to be set aside for $500 secured credit cards, and I'm going to be teaching and educating the incarcerated men and women who are transitioning out of jail at their Freedom Center tomorrow at 8:30 to 10, educating them on how to establish and reestablish and strengthen their credit so they can possibly buy a home. And I'm offering this to your entire community, that if you would like me to come to your organization, please give me a call, 855-563-2843. The cost is nothing. It's absolutely free, and would love to educate as many of your listeners and their groups and their organizations and their churches and mosques and temples to help their members understand credit, enhance their credit, establish their credit, and strengthen their credit, because the credit is the foundation to success in any type of future financial situation or investment that they go into in the future.
And because David said that number so quickly, let me say it again, 855-563-2843. Thank you, my friend. It is always a pleasure.
No, thank you.
To take time with you.
And I'll be calling Ray every Wednesday for a health and wellness check now that we know he's got a target on him. No problem.
He would probably appreciate that.
I know he would. He needs somebody to talk to. All right, love you. Bye. Talk to you later.
Love you, too. We're going to take a break for news. Be back with more after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Whenever I talk to Cameron Stevenson, who is the founding editor and chief political correspondent at the Copper Courier, the Arizona arm of the Courier newsroom, I always ask him about the weather. And I would just like everyone in our area to know that Phoenix is 60 degrees right now. So, it's not like they're wearing bikinis and going to the beach. Cameron, a friend of mine who lived his whole life in Chicago, like 10 or 12 years ago, moved to L.A., and I went out to dinner with him a year or two ago, and it was like, 58. And he was wearing a shirt, a sweater, and a puffer coat at 58 degrees. And I was like, dude, what has happened to you? 58 degrees is almost bathing suit weather in Chicago. But, at much lower temps than that, you see guys walking around in T-shirts and shorts. So, Cameron, it's pretty chilly. You got your puffer coat?
Yeah, I got my proper coat on, a nice T-shirt, some jeans, decided to wear shoes instead of sandals today. We got a couple of clouds here and there, so didn't want to get too wild in case it started raining a little bit.
Well, now that we've got that out of the way, I know one of the articles you wrote recently was about a newly elected congresswoman who decided to stay in Arizona and participate in Martin Luther King activities rather than try to get into any of the inaugural events. I mean, obviously, this was one of those rare confluences where the inauguration day falls on the Martin Luther King holiday. Was that controversial, that decision in Arizona?
It wasn't too controversial in her district specifically, although I'm sure there were people who were annoyed at her decision not to go to Trump's inauguration. I think it turned out to be a very symbolic thing for her to do, to celebrate civil rights on a day when a lot of civil rights protections were revoked and rolled back. But as far as representing her district, Representative Yasmin Ansari did an excellent job because that's right where they wanted her to be.
Good. Is she going to be a big star?
She has risen quickly and vocally.
This might not be fair, but to me, she kind of has an AOC vibe.
That very well could be what she's going for. She's billed as a young progressive. I believe she's 29. She was a Phoenix City Councilwoman for a few years. She's big into protecting the climate. She's worried about the future of our planet, and she has no qualms about being very vocal about that. How that plays out once she's comfortable in office is only time will tell. But she's tested, she's trained, she's fairly popular, and she ran on opposing Trump's anti-climate plans, and so far it seems like she's going to do her best to follow through with that.
Well, I wish her nothing but the best. Usually, the rule of thumb is your first year in Congress, you kind of keep your head down and just, figure out the lay of the land. She is a Democrat, right? I mean, I believe that's...
Yes, yeah. She's
so it's not Democrat. Like she's going to be, being asked to co-sponsor legislation, since in Congress, Mike Johnson and his crew have made it pretty clear that they don't want to play with the other side.
Right, yeah. I don't see too much bipartisan legislation coming through her. And as far as I know, she wasn't given any major committee assignments in Congress. A lot of those were reserved for many of the very, very, very senior members of the Democratic Party who are in office. And so she's going to use the bully pulpit that she has, which is social media. She's developed a very distinct voice online, a very dedicated following. And yeah, I think you're right. I think she is trying to, or at least doing her best to implement the successes she's seen from Representative Ocasio-Cortez.
Yeah. Oh, God, I don't know, years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I was interviewing somebody, I don't know if they were from the Sierra Club, because, at that time, people who were writing about climate change said, that people in the Midwest, people around the Great Lakes, we better start figuring out how we're going to defend our water supplies, because some people were predicting there would be water wars. And the person I talked to said, no, not going to happen. But, with all these L.A. fires, I've been reading articles about this couple, and I forget their name, owns more of the water in L.A. than anybody else. And, you read the fine print, and they have these thousands and thousands of acres of farmland. So they have made arrangements to buy all these water rights. It sounds like something similar is happening in Arizona. You were writing about a lawsuit about over water. Please tell the listeners about that.
Yeah. This might sound just unreal to a place where there's regular rain and lakes and natural water. But we have a lot of our water reserves tied up underground. It rains here up in the north. It goes into the ground, and we're able to drill and extract it from there. We don't know how much water is down there exactly. We have ideas, but the state has been very hesitant. They've never really done a thorough examination of how much water we have available. Couple that with the fact that we allow people to take as much groundwater as they want from rural Arizona, and corporate farms. There were some corporate farms from the Midwest, actually, but quite a few more from places like the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. They set up these mega farms out in rural Arizona where they were able to extract hundreds of millions of gallons of water, basically for free, and use it for their crops that they were able to ship back to their home countries. And it's all technically legal. It's not so much of a water war as it is water just going to the highest bidder. And for whatever reason, we've known about this for several years, and our Republican-controlled legislature is very against stopping it because they consider that anti-business.
Does it play into the equation that at least one of the mega corporations involved in this is foreign owned?
You would think so, but so far not really. It really goes back to, I guess, the idea that the conservative ideal that if someone wants to pay for it, then they can have it without any forward thinking to, well, what happens when we run out of it? And we've seen that. There are communities that have run out of water for different reasons, but that hasn't spurred any legislation to actually regulate our water, find out how much we have, or secure assured amounts so that people don't, so when people turn on their sinks, that water comes out.
Mm-hmm. Is the fact that the legislature doesn't seem too concerned about this? I know that you've talked about in your article that there were some rural areas where, at least temporarily, wells ran dry. But, that's not what if the fancy Tony suburbs, the place where you've got those multi-million-dollar cliffside houses, if they run out of water, don't you think it might get a little bit more reaction in the state legislature?
Actually, it's funny you should mention that, and because we did have an instance of that happening about a year and a half ago, although it wasn't an ongoing thing. But the thing to keep in mind with those rural wells is that they aren't temporarily dry unless we have some huge, massive rainfall. Rainy season, they're dry for good. Those local farmers can only drill about, for example, 100 meters into the ground, but these corporate farms, they can drill 150, 200, 300 meters into the ground. And so they're taking up the water before it even gets to those local wells.
So can they drill lower because it's more expensive and they have the money? I mean, or are there regulations that say if you're residential, this is as low as you can go?
No, it's not regulations. We don't do too many of those out here.
I'm sorry, I keep forgetting you're the Wild West.
That's right. That's exactly what it is. No, it's just that they have more money and they can get commercial grade drills, whereas these are, they're going up against local farmers who have, they've invested a lot for them, which is, $25,000, $50,000 into digging these wells and building these aquifers. But these corporations, they can spend millions, and that's still cheaper than it costs them to get water back home. But we actually did have an instance where one of those multi-million-dollar property up in the mountains, cliffside communities ran out of water a few years ago. The developers were able to kind of get around our water rules. We have rules that if anyone builds any development that's built, it needs to have a guarantee of 100-year-long water supply that's available to them. Of course, we have loopholes to that, and the developers built this community without a water supply. And so this community, which again is multi-million-dollar homes, a lot of it is people who moved here from out of state who weren't familiar with our Wild West makeup.
Who just assumed that water was something you could count on.
Right. Yeah. No. They okay. Well, when I get in the shower and turn the knob, I will be able to take a shower. And they quickly found that wasn't the case. So they essentially, long story short, they ignored the problem for as long as they could, and then when it became an immediate problem, it then became the legislature's problem, and they were able to quickly craft emergency legislation to cut a deal with. Some people to build water lines, very expensive water lines up into this area that's still going to take several years for them to establish. But because they're rich and they were able to make noise in the right ways, they are able to assure water for themselves. But that is a very specific example. Poor rural farmers don't have those resources.
In Los Angeles a few years ago, there was a lot of reporting over a big reservoir that had dropped so significantly that they were actually finding bodies that had been dumped in the reservoir decades before. And everybody was like, oh, my God, this is so awful. And then within a year, there were really heavy rains and the reservoir filled back up again. Is there any chance that there will be really heavy rains that could fill some of these wells up again?
It's possible. I mean, it's not out of the realm of the possibilities that we could get more groundwater. We could have a very rainy season. We have two main things that are going against us. One is our population is still exploding out here. People are still moving to Arizona regardless of these dangers or these risks. And so with more people becomes a bigger burden on our water supply to provide it to more people. And then we also have the climate emergency that we're going through is that because nobody is adequately addressing the harm we're doing to our environment, we're looking at longer summers, we're looking at drier rainy seasons. And if that continues, then it's only a matter of time before the water dries up. We're already seeing this with the This is a whole other thing, but we also have a deal with a handful of other states to share water from the Colorado River, and that has gone down to historic lows, which has caused havoc between us and California and a number of tribal nations and a few different states, all scrambling to try and get access to this water, which in the past, it would come back, but because we have done so much damage to our climate, it's harder to make those gains again.
I'm speaking with Cameron Stevenson, who's the founding editor and chief political correspondent at the Copper Courier in Arizona. We are going to take a break and be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Joining me is Cameron Stevenson, the founding editor and chief political correspondent at the Copper Courier, which is all the news of Arizona. And Cameron, this December, wrote that these Trump pardons for the January 6th insurrectionists could potentially include as many as 13 Arizona convicts. Tell us about that, please.
Well, it's not potential anymore. They all got pardoned. They're all free. They're not even considered convicts anymore because their records are wiped clean. But yeah, we like every state had our share of insurrectionists that went out to the Capitol on January 6, 2021, and broke into the building, beat people, violently assaulted police officers, and caused havoc. And now they're good to go. Not only is their record wiped away, but they can buy guns. They're encouraged to kind of keep doing what they've been doing, I guess. Nothing says you've done nothing wrong like being absolved of all wrongdoing. It's I mean, I guess disappointing is a very weak word to describe it, but it's just very sad to see that's where we're at.
Unbelievable, isn't it? I had a story last week before the pardons officially came through. Capitol officer Michael Fanone said that he was really worried about it and what would happen to him and his mom and his family and his his kids, and he said he was going to try to get a restraining order against, if not all of them, at least the people who nearly beat him to death. And because what came out a few days later is because, like you just said, of the pardons, where it's like, okay, you never did anything wrong. You don't have any restrictions. He was told that because the people were pardoned, they didn't do anything wrong. Therefore, he cannot be a victim. Therefore, there's no information about who did what to him that he can use to get a restraining order.
Yeah, it's unreal. I mean, what happened to him, it was on live TV. It was live streamed. People were proud of it. But because now there's no legal documentation of it, they did nothing wrong, and so he has nothing to restrain them. He has no reason to get a restraining order. It's unreal. And even if, I mean, let's say a judge was able to use a little bit of common sense in this case and be judicial and look at the facts and decide that he was worthy of a restraining order, what part of our system allows for them to actually respect that? I mean, they could come after him despite a restraining order and get another pardon. I don't even know what to do with that information, to be honest. It's pretty terrifying, especially as someone who has covered the January 6th attack very critically. I wrote that list of 13 people, and they know that I wrote about them.
Okay. Well, I hope you're safe. I hope nobody gives you any grief about that. Hey, Cameron, are you still teaching part-time at Arizona State University?
Yeah, that was, I got to commend you. That was a great transition.
Well, no, because I wanted to know, what are your students, what are they saying to you about the state of politics right now, the Trump election, the pardoning of the January 6th insurrectionists? Right now it's just a lot of shock, to be honest. It's one thing to report on the news. It's another thing to know that you're going to be reporting on what's in the history books, if that makes sense. And it's very daunting. I think it's given people some pause into where they want to go professionally, not only with what's going on in our legal system, but that so many, journalistic outlets have been sued and settled lawsuits in regards to how they've covered Donald Trump in his presidency, or even, in his crimes, which he's been convicted of. And so it's a very transformative time, I guess. Are they sure they still want to go into journalism?
The sports journalists are.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The others, there are. We have some new interns here. One of them covered the RNC, the Republican convention last year. The other one covered the Democratic convention, and they are both just tenacious. They are committed. They know the importance of their role in the Fourth Estate, and they are committed to upholding it. And I think that's something that's never going to go away. It is very encouraging for me to see that, it is an unstable time, a risky time to be involved in, government politics, holding that accountable in any way. But I think there's always going to be people who know that is an important responsibility, and they're up to the challenge.
Man, that is so good to hear. I interview a lot of political science professors, and I've been talking to them about what their students say. And they tell me that the students are expressing fear, really, especially, if a student happens to be a gay student or a non-binary student, they're very concerned about what the future holds for them. My feeling is, and maybe you think this is too Pollyanna, we just got to hold on till the midterms. I really think that I think that this flurry is designed, this flurry of executive orders and activities and raids. I think it's Trump is putting on a show. He's showing us, how he can be tough and all this stuff. And I'm hoping that it eases off a little bit. But, he's already making so many people mad. I have to believe that the midterms will bring us a little bit of relief. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, this past week has brought a weariness I've not felt since 2017. It's very tiring and exhausting. On the other hand, this is the oldest president we've ever had or sworn into office. He didn't make it a week before he had to hit the golf course. I think your intuition is right that there's a lot of bluster at the beginning. And maybe this is a more cynical approach, but at the end of the day, his main focus is taking care of the tech leaders and the oligarchs who got him into office. And that's his main thing is cutting taxes, saving rich people money, and filling his own pocket as much as he can. And I think if we're able to hold that accountable, if we're able to continue to help people feel secure and confident in our elections, because that is something to be concerned about. If he spends the next 2 years investigating our elections and his Department of Justice decides that they aren't secure, then that puts the midterms in jeopardy. But I think if we're able to focus on the issues that really matter and hold this administration accountable, and if the people who are angry with him actually hold to that, then we got a fighting chance.
Cameron Stevenson, the political reporter for the Copper Courier, all things Arizona. Always a pleasure, Cameron. Always fun. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I promise I'll have something more optimistic to talk about next time.
Okay, I'll hold you to it. We're going to take a break. We'll be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I am joined now by Kate Lincoln Goldfinch, who is an immigration attorney in Texas. It's been a while since we've talked, Kate, and things have not gotten better.
No, they have not.
We have been seeing reports all day today about these ICE raids in Chicago and where they are and who they're scooping up. But I know that Chicago is not the only city that is seeing this. You're based in Austin, is that correct?
I am, and we had some actions in Austin yesterday, Sunday, and there were the local Austin ICE brought in the DEA from Houston to conduct these actions. And it appears, as far as I can tell, what they're doing right now is what I call targeted actions plus collateral arrest. So rather than going to the supermarket where a lot of immigrants shop, what they're doing is they're going to the home of someone who is on their list. Either maybe they have a removal order, they have, some type of criminal interaction in the past, and then they'll arrest everyone sort of around. So if there's anybody else in the house, or in one case in Austin, they followed someone who left their house and then arrested both that person and the passenger of their car. That seems to be what they're doing in this sort of first wave of, deportations.
Because what? It's arrest now and find out later whether or not you're a citizen?
Well, yeah. I mean, and, I had another client who was pulled over. He was driving the car. He's undocumented, no criminal history. His wife is a U.S. citizen, and their 3 little kids were in the back seat. She doesn't know how to drive, so he was driving and was pulled over for his license plate, nothing. And the police officer called ICE. 9 ICE agents showed up and took the husband away. And now because the wife wasn't able to drive and her children were in the car and the baby was needing formula and diapers and they were stuck by the side of the road, I think because of that, ICE ended up bringing him back 3 hours later. I'm not sure they would have had there not been those extenuating circumstances.
So one of the things that Governor Pritzker and also Mayor Brandon Johnson have said repeatedly is that there is going to be no cooperation, no assistance offered by the Chicago police. If the Chicago police are, showing up somewhere and taking a report or talking to a family and they realize somebody in the house is undocumented, it is not part of their job to leave and then call ICE and say, oh, by the way, we were just at this house. Do things work differently in Texas?
Certainly they do in most parts of Texas. There's a lot of jurisdictions that have these cooperative agreements. They're called 287G agreements, where the local police authorities are essentially deputized to enforce immigration laws. But also, a lot of this stuff, officers can go rogue, even in a, so-called sort of sanctuary area where the local police policy is not to cooperate. An officer still might call ICE, and ICE would certainly be willing to come and check it out.
These are extraordinary things that are happening, but it's not. This is not a bug. This is a feature. It's been Tom Homan, who's talked about this. They've talked about, we're going to do these roundups, and we're going to get who we get. Kind of like we'll sort it all out later. And this just reminds me of seeing interviews with immigrants before the election saying that they were going to vote for Trump because he was going to get rid of the bad immigrants, but he wasn't going to get rid of them because they were a good immigrant. They don't really care, do they?
No, they don't. And that is certainly evident in the comment section of my social media videos, because I do a lot of, updates about what's happening. And it's very clear that the base, and Stephen Miller and the Trump administration, to them, just by virtue of being out of status, either maybe somebody entered with a visa that expired, or they entered without inspection, or they're an undocumented person, in the eyes of, whatever we'll call them, the enforcers, let's say, being undocumented equals criminal. And the most severe form of punishment is warranted in their minds. I've had people on my comments calling for, the murder of people. It's like somebody said, just kick them out of the plane, and it doesn't matter, who cares, the whole family can go with them. And just quite shocking and heartless, really, especially for those of us who, pay attention and know immigrants and know their histories and who they are, and, have respect for what they've gone through, what has gotten them here. But mostly it's, I'm so impressed by all the immigrants I know and how hard they work. And, all of this, they've left everything behind and came here just in some cases to make a better life for themselves and their children. And isn't that admirable? Isn't that something that we would want around us? It's just when you know and love immigrants, and then you hear these words on the other side from people who clearly don't know immigrants, it just tends to be really heartbreaking and I think fatiguing for a lot of us to just hear this drumbeat of hatred. It's really overwhelmingly exhausting.
When you get this feedback to the videos you post, do you have a sense of where it's coming from? Are these really, truly people who feel that somehow they would have a better career if it weren't for immigrants? Is it people who just don't want anybody who's not white to be around? Do you get a sense for what the motivation is?
Well, I think in some of these cases, I really do believe that these are bots, that they're not real people. And I try and look and see, does this person have any followers or any information? But in other cases, where it's obviously a human, they do sometimes just come out with the truth. Like one person a couple of days ago said, "Make America white again," in response to one of my videos. And then another person said, "Well, I guess it's only white people that get questioned," and they'll just say it. outright, and I'll actually repost these comments with videos and say, you're not going to win any morality prizes, but at least you're telling the truth about what is at the heart of all of this, because I think that's it. And everything, anything else that people are saying is, to me, it's a lie.
Some of the farmers who were interviewed before these mass roundups started being planned and executed. There was, I remember, a dairy farmer who said, look, my dairy farm runs 24/7. Without immigrants, it doesn't run. So if there are raids here, I can't remember, he was up north, it might have been North Dakota or South Dakota. He said, my dairy farm shuts down in 48 hours. And, I know that here in Chicago, a lot of restaurants are having some of their kitchen staff not show up because they're terrified the restaurant is going to be raided. And, people, I saw one video with a guy standing by his farm field, and he said, you know what? Food prices are going to really go through the roof because look behind me. Nobody's picking these crops. When do you think people will wake up to what's going on and the effect it's going to have on all of us?
Well, hopefully soon. I was looking at the stats today, and it was like multiple trillions of dollars would be the economic impact of a true mass deportation of the undocumented population. Absolutely apocalyptically devastating to our economy if it were to actually occur. So my hope is that all of this is just like early, splashy, make good on campaign promises, do a bunch of things that people talk about in the media and everybody feels satisfied, and then turn to, actually a, work visa expansion or something like that. But if they keep hard charging the way that they are, we're only in week 1, which is kind of baffling, but if they keep going, it's going to get real bad real fast economically for people.
I'm talking to Kate Lincoln Goldfinch, who is an immigration attorney based in Austin, Texas. We're going to continue our talk right after this.
Don't turn that dial.
A dangerous mistake to make.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now on WCPT 820.
Joining me is Kate Lincoln Goldfinch, who is an immigration attorney in Texas. And in Austin, Texas, there are ICE raids being conducted just as we have seen here in Chicago. Some of the stories, there's a story in the Tribune, Kate, about a woman who got a call from her husband's place of employment where he had worked for 10 years saying, hey, your husband didn't show up to work today. And within minutes, there were ICE agents banging on her front door. I guess they figured if he didn't have his paperwork, there would be other people in the house that didn't as well. One of the things that some of the activist organizations have been doing up here in the Chicago area is telling everybody and anybody going out into the neighborhoods to explain to people what their rights are, that they don't have to open the door, that an administrative warrant is not the same thing as a warrant signed by a judge. But it's really hard. Most people, have no experience with the legal system. And the one expert I talked to last week said, even if you open your front door a crack to hear what somebody has to say, that constitutes, quote unquote, opening your door for them, and they can then legally enter. It's really tricky, Kate.
It is tricky, and it's hard to know what to do in a particular situation, whether racism is driving the enforcement, and if you just cooperate a little bit, does this officer just want to make sure that you don't have a warrant and then they're going to let you go? Or are they looking for evidence that you're from another country? But I think that you are right, and all of these activists who are out there getting out the Know Your Rights information are correct, that this is the way that immigrants can defend themselves in these times, is to enforce their own rights, and they're protected under the Constitution just like anyone else. They have the right to free speech. They have the right against search and seizure. They have the right to remain silent. All of that is true. And so, yes, I mean, put a sign on the door so the kids don't open the door, and everybody knows we don't answer the door when someone's knocking. And if they are, we're going to ask them to slide the warrant under the door, and we're going to see if it's really the name of someone living there. I saw a video just yesterday of an ICE action in Austin or near Austin where ICE was looking for someone who used to live in that house, but they were there temporarily. But luckily, in this particular situation, I said, okay, this person's not here anymore. We'll see you later. But in other scenarios, if the door is open, they're going to start asking around. But again, if an ICE officer, a police officer is asking someone, where are you from? How long have you been here? How did you get here? Et cetera. No one should be answering those questions, really, unless they're a U.S. citizen or they have a green card. Then it's like, just do not answer the questions, because it's only going to lead to trouble for people. And so standing strong in those stressful moments and enforcing your right to remain silent, asking for a lawyer, do not sign anything. That's what's going to help save people in these really awful times.
The person I spoke to last week said that their advice to folks was, do not answer any question, whether it's about you or somebody else. Don't speculate. Don't offer anything about anybody. And just keep saying, like, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. Is that advice that you would also give?
Yes, although I would say, rather than I don't know, I would say I'm exercising my right to remain silent. I want to speak to a lawyer. And also saying, am I being arrested? If there's a raid happening, let's say somebody's at work and immigration shows up, or they're, at a church and immigration's out in the parking lot, and some officer says, what's your name, et cetera. The response to them is, am I being arrested? And if they say no, you just walk away calmly. You don't run away. You just say, okay, thank you, goodbye, have a good day. If they say yes, now depending upon where you live, like in Texas where I live, it's a requirement to identify yourself if you're being arrested. So you have to either show a document or give your name, address, and date of birth. But in other states, you don't have to identify yourself in an arrest. So it's important to know that rule. But always the first question is, am I being arrested? And if not, get out of there.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you saw this, but Dr. Phil from television fame apparently was in Chicago going around with the ICE agents. And I guess that was to make sure, just in case the raids were not newsworthy enough, I guess that was to make sure that all of the television cameras were there. Have you had any celebrities join your raids?
Not that I've seen so far, but what I have seen, which is just as vile, is the ICE Facebook page has been posting the names and the pictures of people that they're looking for, that they've apprehended publicly.
We had one, it was a downstate, I think she was a state senator, who posted, like, if you think you're working, if there's somebody that you think you need to rat out, you can call me and tell me, and I'll make sure I protect you. And I thought, how vile is that? I hate, one of the things that's worst about all of these horrible things that Trump is doing is this idea that you should keep an eye on other people and rat them out. I mean, that we've seen that, with stuff like, did somebody talk to, your neighbor about an abortion clinic? Let us know that those conversations are taking place. And that idea of turning citizen against citizen, to me, is as reprehensible as some of the horrible things they're trying to do. Have you seen any of that? Have any of your politicians said things like that?
Well, sure. I mean, it's Texas, so there's probably a proposed bill in the legislature right now on that stuff. And of course, I think it's Missouri has the new proposal where they're proposing to pay $1,000 for anybody who makes a tip that leads to an arrest. And it's just, I mean, don't we all have a memory of what this sounds and looks a lot like? It's a lot like Germany, you know? I mean, it's like, of course, this is awful. I mean, in those memos that went out about the DEI and the federal, agencies, and that people should be reporting anyone who's continuing DEI activities within the agencies, it's all really, really creepy, and it really should creep everybody out who's paying attention. This business of like reporting on each other,
here in the Chicago area, people have been, for the most part, really incensed about these raids, that somehow we know that, Trump doesn't like Chicago. He's made that clear. J.B. Pritzker is no fan of Donald Trump's. So we sort of feel that we've been targeted. Texas is a kind of a different, Austin, though, that's pretty liberal. Do you think that's why these raids are focusing maybe on Austin? Because, we don't like those libs. We want to own them.
That's right. I mean, they have, they do target these cities like Austin where, anything that's like a sanctuary where there's not cooperation, that's where they conduct these actions.
So do you think that everybody's saying, he's all into shock and awe. He wants to throw a bunch of spaghetti against the wall and make a big impression. And then, it's going to die down and he's going to spend more time golfing, et cetera, and so forth. But this time around, he's propped up by people who know how to get things done. I mean, the first time he was in the White House, he was kind of stumbling along and, he brought generals into his administration. And this time around, I think people know how to manipulate him to get their goals achieved. I'm a little bit worried that's going to be uglier this time around. What do you think?
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, it's going to be, they brought back all the policies that took 3 years or 4 years to build in the first administration in, one day, on day one. So it's all going to be very fast and furious. And so it's going to be really important for activists and impact litigators and everybody, to act as fast as possible.
What do you think is going to be happening next? And how many calls are you getting from people?
So I think we're going to see these actions increase over time. We're going to see these targeted actions, and they're going to do more expansive raids. And, hopefully, like we talked about, some of the economic impacts will become obvious, and it will slow what they're doing. But we'll have to wait and see. And Joan, I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to go. I'm being called to a live TV interview, and they've called me 5 times. So
okay.
On camera.
Thanks, Kate. Take off.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
I used to work in television. I know those people can be pushy. Kate Lincoln Goldfinch is a Texas immigration attorney, and I'm sure that in the coming years we will be having her on again and again and again, as well as the local activist groups here in the Chicago area. Actually, we were kind of out of time anywho. So thanks for being with me today. I hope you had a great weekend. We have to pace ourselves, kids. We have like 600 some days before we have a chance to vote again. And I really hope and pray that the turnout in the midterm elections this time around is really, really massive. The people who sat home, I just can't imagine them sitting home again. And the people who stayed home because they didn't like what Joe Biden was doing with Netanyahu and wasn't tough enough to fix what was going on in Gaza. Well, now you've got a president who says all the Palestinians should be removed from Gaza, relocated to other Middle East states, and the whole strip should be developed by people who build resorts, because, it's so beautiful and the weather's so nice, and there's the ocean. And Trump, I swear to you, was quoted in one source as saying, and I'd be interested in doing that too. Yeah. Yep. How'd that protest vote or staying home to protest Joe Biden, how'd that work out for you? Anywho, that is it for me. Driving it home with Patty Vasquez is up next. Patty has escaped the snow of New Orleans, and she is with us once again. She's going to be joined in part by Dan Schaefer of the Recombobulation Area and Civic Media. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And, of course, Richard Chu starts our day at 6 a.m. He's going to be talking to cartoonist and comics journalist Josh Neufeld. That's Richard Chu from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. I will, of course, be back here tomorrow. And among other folks, we are going to be talking to the D.C. bureau chief for The Nation magazine, one of the magazines that does a lot of political reporting. And we're going to wrap the day up tomorrow by talking to Daniel Biss. He's running for mayor again, and you may have heard about that controversy over a politically inappropriate picture that some Evanston firefighters posted. Lots to talk about. Join me tomorrow at 2. Until then, stay safe, have a great night, and good night.